Hey, folks, today's episode is brought to you by one of our favorite sponsors. Of course, I'm talking about sunsetlakecbd.com. Use the code LEFTISBEST and you will get 20% off. 20% off what, you say? Well, they have all sorts of tinctures. They have CBD tinctures in different strengths. And with melatonin, they have another one called, is it Sleepy Time or something like that? It is, I don't know what's in that, but it works. They also have CBD fudge and CBD coffee. They have smokables. They have keef. They have flour. They have pre-rolls. They have gummies. Oh boy, do they have gummies. They have CBD sour gummies. They have CBD sleep gummies with melatonin. They have focus gummies with lion's mane and cordyceps and CBD. They have it with ashwagandha to help you relax. I'm not pronouncing that right, but I'm not even pronouncing CBD correctly either. They also have CBD gummies with 1 milligram of THC and also a Delta 9 ones with 5 milligrams of hemp-derived THC with their CBD. That's for a little bit more fun time, if you will. Great products, third-party tested. They use integrated pest management and do not use pesticides. Those don't always come together. They practice regenerative farming in conjunction with the University of Vermont because they're up in the Burlington area. They're also great movement partners. They have donated thousands of dollars to things like Union Strike funds, refugee resettlement, Give Directly, Planned Parenthood, food pantries. They've done mutual aid with the floods they had up in Vermont last year. Carceral reform, great company, great product, great folks up there, mostly employee owned, and they never pay anything less than a $20 minimum wage. Left is best, 20% off. sunsetlakecbd.com. Check it out. And also, we should also be talking about that merch since we got a big plug the other day, but maybe we'll do that later in the program. It's speaking of the program, now's the program.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday. Tuesday, Casual Tuesday. Wednesday, Casual Hump Day. Thursday, Casual Thurs. That's what we call it. And Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday,
Good job.
March 22nd, 2024.
Not quite.
My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report.
For those on the podcast, Sam's eating an apple.
Don't choke.
We are broadcasting live. Steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, from the podcast This is Revolution, Jason Myles will be joining us a little bit later. But first, Russia, China veto the U.S. faux ceasefire resolution at the UN Security Council. Meanwhile, UK threatens Israel arms embargo. Finland to resume UNRWA funding. And we are just days away from when Israel is supposed to certify that they're going to allow humanitarian assistance to reach Palestinians in Gaza. In the House, Johnson says he's going to invite Netanyahu to address Congress. And in the midst of the attempted passage of the budget, which breaking just passed, Marjorie Taylor Greene files a motion to vacate in an attempt to topple Johnson's speakership. IMF approves an $880 million loan for Ukraine. And the Republicans show their hands. Republican Study Committee wants to cut Social Security and ban universal free lunch. Also get rid of the National Labor Relations Board and others. We'll get into that. DOJ announces its antitrust challenge to Apple as anticipated. 16 Republican attorney generals sue the Biden administration over its pausing of the federal permits for new liquid natural gas exports. That's a big deal, much of which has gone very much underreported. And lastly, New York Attorney General is getting ready to seize a bunch of Donald Trump's property. And lastly, it looks like Senator Menendez in New Jersey is a victim of the woke left mind virus against people who are gold bugs, as he announces he will not be running for Senate again as a Democrat. All this and more on today's program. So much news today, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. It is a casual Friday.
It is. It is a casual Friday.
And I got a little too casual at the beginning of the show. I tried at the last minute. I just couldn't help it. I had this apple here, and I couldn't manage to deny myself one more bite of the apple. It's an Evercrisp.
I was about to ask, yeah.
It's an Evercrisp. These are, I only eat local apples. And I say in the main.
Okay.
Which means I'll go to like a farmer's market or something like that. But they've been stored for, a while. So it's not like getting an Evercrisp in, October.
Mm-hmm.
But
why is it false advertising then if it's an Evercrisp and it's not so much of ever?
No, that's my point, is it's still pretty crisp, but it's not like getting it in October. So
okay, so Evercrisp for some time. It's a crisp for a few months.
Fascinating.
Month crisp.
It's more than, I think you really took this a little
6
further
month
than
crisp.
I wanted to go. I was just justifying eating an apple before.
Almost choking and making your producer give you Heimlich, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Everybody's looking like, oh my God, what's going to happen?
Good thing that's in Bradley's contract.
All right. So the budget, as far as I know, passed in the House. Like we just got this notice like 20 minutes ago, not even. And at some point in that process, Marjorie Taylor Greene put in the motion to vacate, which only takes one person to do. And it's unclear whether or not she requested it be prioritized because it theoretically could have been privileged. In other words, nothing can happen until that's addressed. We will check out the reporting and be talking about it a little bit later in the program today. Remember, it needed 2/3 vote, but let's save that because the other vote that just took place or didn't take place was in the Security Council this morning. The U.S. had offered a resolution that is being reported as a ceasefire or a temporary ceasefire resolution. And in fact, it's not. It is, aside from the, folks can quibble at the notion of like, is a temporary ceasefire really a ceasefire? Putting that aside, this resolution did not call for a ceasefire.
Yep.
It suggested a ceasefire. Now, that's an important distinction because the UN does, when the UN Security Council passes something, it is meaningful. It doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to do anything to uphold it, but it does have theoretically the force of international law. Here is a clip. Best explanation we can give you is Phyllis Bennis, who we've had on this program, but not for a long time, I think. A fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies was on with Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! And her explanation of this is probably the best one you will hear, to the extent you hear any on the mainstream press.
Phyllis, if you can talk about what the U.S. has introduced into the UN Security Council, it could be voted on today, and it
Pause it
also
for 1
what could be
second. We should make it clear. This was before it was vetoed by China and Russia.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Security Council. It could be voted on today, and it also what could be voted on are is the resolution that has been adopted by or sponsored by 8 of the elected members of the Security Council.
Thanks, Amy. You know, what we're looking at here is a lot of playing with words. What is different is the language of the Biden administration. We heard it yesterday from Secretary of State Blinken. We're hearing it from President Biden. We're hearing it from others using the word ceasefire, saying immediate ceasefire in some cases. We're seeing the New York Times is saying that the U.S. is introducing a resolution at the Security Council calling for an immediate ceasefire. That's not the case. What the U.S. resolution calls for, and we should be clear, there has not been a formal distribution of what the U.S. is actually going to put on the table for the vote this morning. There's at least 3 different versions circulating around, but they're all about the same on the critical description. It's in the first paragraph, the first operative paragraph of the resolution, uses the language of an immediate ceasefire, but it doesn't actually call for a ceasefire. What it does is recognize the importance of a ceasefire and then says, and therefore we should support the negotiations that are underway in Doha, in Qatar. These are the negotiations that have been underway for weeks. They are mainly focused on the release of hostages, as well as the parameters of a short-term ceasefire, probably 6 weeks. But the key thing is that the U.S. draft does not call for an actual Security Council call for a ceasefire. The language of the 8 of the 10 elected members of the Security Council is much simpler and much more direct. It says explicitly that the Security Council demands an immediate ceasefire respected by all parties, leading to a sustainable ceasefire. Period, full stop. The U.S. language is very convoluted. It's various versions of the Security Council determines the imperative of an immediate and sustained ceasefire to protect civilians on all sides, and then says something about, and therefore we unequivocally support the negotiations that are underway. So it takes all of the authority out of the Security Council, makes the council into essentially a group of cheerleaders for the existing negotiations that are underway, and takes away any additional pressure that an actual Security Council demand for an immediate ceasefire would have. Because Security Council resolutions, as you know, Amy, and I think most of our listeners know, is part of international law. It's enforceable. It doesn't mean that it would be enforced, but it's a very powerful signal, something that an acknowledgement of the importance of a ceasefire is simply not that. It's not.
Yeah, that was my favorite explanation of it too, because it's actually quite cynical here. It's the United States thumbing its nose at the notion of international law, because it says in their resolution, while gesturing at a ceasefire and attempting, I think, to appease a global community that is turning its back on the United States and, of course, the domestic concerns for the Biden administration, using those words while undercutting the very enforcement mechanism of international law, which is supposed to be the United Nations. It's essentially in this language saying, we are the ones who still make the decision here as the brokers for these negotiations. It's really the United States and Israel and I guess the representatives of the Palestinian people within this context that are the ones who will make this decision. Well, then you don't have international law if that's the case. You don't have these kinds of standards.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's simple as the Biden administration feeling the pressure domestically, realizing that that support for arms sales to Israel is beginning to buckle a little bit in the Senate, and increasingly. They were going to lose about 15, 20 votes. I don't know what the ultimate vote was in terms of Democrats passing this budget, but they were going to lose that for their for the budgets suspension of UNRWA funding for a year. I think this is the Biden administration more or less, doing the same thing that Chuck Schumer was hoping to do when he came out against Netanyahu, which is the dynamic. The best way to think about it is a limited hangout. Mm-hmm. The existence of even that U.S. Fake call for a ceasefire would be indicative of the pressure that's building, and give license for other places to do stuff. I mean, we're starting to see like some countries in Europe who are starting to have a weapons embargo. Theoretically, it would allow a little bit of oxygen for that, but at the end of the day, it's also designed like a limited hangout to relieve some pressure and say, we've done this. And that's why I think the reporting of it and the characterization of the ceasefire resolution that we get domestically, for the most part, has been not accurate. That it's not really, I mean, the point of a UN resolution is that it has the force of the Security Council behind it, or I should say a UN Security Council resolution. It has the force of the Security Council behind it. That means that all the major powers in the world are aligned in an agreement. And therefore, it allows other countries, including those countries, to rely on that ruling from the Security Council to justify domestic measures and also to create pressure on Israel. And so this was, I think this is about the U.S. trying to let the air out of the tires. And I think that's why basically China and Russia, I don't think they care about this, to be honest with you. But it's in their national interest to put pressure on the U.S. because the U.S. is taking, the Biden administration is taking such a outlier position.
Oh, absolutely. It's in their interest as well not to, totally. It's in their interest to essentially show and not give the United States an out here and say that like this resolution is sufficient, because it's not. And those language differences are important. But, what I think, Phyllis said there at the beginning is also notable, that the language of the United States is changing. The press conference yesterday from Tony Blinken, when he said that 100% of people in Gaza are at the risk of famine at this point, and that aid must come through. Look, I'm looking for anything I can grab my hands on here to hopefully save some lives, but it was a much more aggressive posture, significantly undercut by him this morning, shaking hands with Netanyahu and smiling for the camera. But still, the United States is inching towards something a bit more reasonable here. It's just how many Palestinians will be massacred and starved to death before it happens.
Yeah. We'll also talk about where we're at in terms of the famine that is going on there and the implications of that in just a moment.
But like America, China could break off a trade relationship if they really wanted to put the screws to Israel. And,
there's a multitude of things that we could do that have there is no guarantee that whatever the United States did would influence Israel's actions or Netanyahu's actions. But if that was the standard for action, that you have a guarantee you're going to get the exact outcome you want, no one would do anything. I wouldn't speak into this microphone because there's no guarantee it's actually reaching YouTube. I mean, it's an absurd, that argument with all that leverage left on the table, the idea that this won't impact what they do anyways is just an absurd one. It's just absurd. I mean, honestly, it's absurd. We got a word from our sponsor before we return to some of the news, and very appropriate. Today's sponsor is Calm, asking the question, do you ever feel like your brain is on overdrive and your mind is constantly racing?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone
Yeah.
in here is sleep
It's in
deprived.
recovery mode sometimes.
The plans, worries, and to-do lists are never ending. Maybe you're really upset about the news.
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically, of course. Calm can help your mind take a break from the noise by softening anxiety symptoms in the moment and helping you cope with day-to-day stressors. The Calm app puts the tools you need to feel better in your back pocket. If you go to calm.com/majority right now, you're going to get a special offer of 40% off a Calm premium subscription, and new content is added every week. Calm is the #1 app for sleep and meditation, and I'm trying to use it for meditation.
Right.
I'm just like, I with meditation, it's hard for me because I'm like, well, I could meditate and feel less anxiety, or I could scroll through Twitter and feel more anxiety.
Right.
But I'll tell you what Calm does do for me. It is a big part of my sleep regimen. They got sleep stories that put you to sleep. Well, I mean, you fall asleep. It's not quite ASMR, but it's like ASMR I find is creepy. But the sleep stories are
relaxing.
interesting and relaxing. And the thing about Calm is it recognizes that everyone faces unique challenges in their daily lives. Mental health differs from person to person. The amount of time and the times that people have for meditation can vary. Calm strives to provide content that caters to your preferences and needs. Their meditations range to fit your needs each day. They have ones about anxiety and stress. They have some that are about relaxation and focus. They have meditations to help you build habits and taking care of your physical well-being. They have sleep stories with hundreds of titles. Sleep meditations. They have calming music. They have expert-led talks with tips on things like how to overcome stress and anxiety, or how you deal with grief, improving your self-esteem, caring for relationships, and many more things. Calm can help you dedicate just a few minutes each day to reduce stress, improve your focus, and increase your overall well-being. The Calm app puts the tools you need to feel better in your back pocket. If you go to calm.com/majority, that's CALM.com/majority, you're going to get a special offer of 40% off a Calm premium subscription. Like I said, new content is added every week. Stress less, sleep more, and live better with Calm. Again, for listeners of the show, Calm is offering an exclusive offer, 40% off a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/majority. Go to CALM.com/majority, 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library. That's calm.com/majority. We'll put the links in the podcast and YouTube descriptions, as well as on majority.fm. We'll talk about the merch endorsement we got a little bit later. But I just want to go back to, and good for Christine Anandpur. I mean, she's like, at least doing interviews and getting people onto the air that I feel like in many parts of the U.S. media we don't hear from.
And according to the reporting from The Intercept, was one of the CNN reporters who confronted management about their bias in their coverage of Israel's genocide.
And she is senior. I mean, she's been there for a long time.
She can throw her weight around.
Yeah. This is, you'll recall, David Miliband was the foreign secretary for England. I think it was in the last couple of years, late aughts.
Ed Miliband's brother, who was a labor leader for a while.
Exactly. And he is now the president and CEO of the International Rescue Committee. Well, one hopes that, like, when you have like people this close to sort of like power, like in a major country, that maybe these words resonate a little bit more with some of those people. We'll see. But here he is Wednesday on CNN talking about the famine in Gaza.
So, the WHO, you all, everybody is really trying to sound the alarm of what is, we can see by the pictures, this impending famine. Who do you blame for this?
Well, first of all, let's just be absolutely clear that the threat of imminent famine described by the United Nations is not someone, an official in New York, writing a press release. The International Phase Classification System is a detailed, technocratic, quite small c, conservative look at the facts on the ground. They describe, as Secretary Blinken said, 1 million people at level 5, that is famine level. The rest of the population, level 4 is considered an emergency, level 3 a crisis. So 2.2 million people don't know where their next meal is coming from. And the million who are at risk of famine, imminent risk of famine, in level 5, represent the fastest degradation, the fastest acceleration of a hunger crisis that's ever been seen. Now, how do you explain that to get you to your question? This is about very straightforward decisions that are being made on the ground about the number of crossing points, about the number of trucks that are allowed to go through crossing points, about what aid, above all food aid, is allowed to go on the trucks that go across the crossing points, about the transit of trucks once they are inside Gaza, because you'll know a World Food Programme convoy was turned back in the middle of the night inside Gaza last week. So you've got a series of impediments, blockages, restrictions being put in place on lorries carrying the most basic humanitarian aid. And it's not getting through to the people who need it. That's why you're ending up in the situation where what are frankly fourth and fifth best alternatives, dropping aid from the sky, building a pier that's going to be online in another 6 weeks, that won't help the people at imminent risk of famine now. What they need is different decisions about crossing points, about truck numbers, about what goes in the trucks.
So those decisions...
We should be clear here. There's a couple of things to note. First off, the experts I've been reading basically say that, like, with a significant portion of the people, particularly in northern Gaza, the implications of this famine, even if aid was to reach them tomorrow, there are going to be lives, many, many lives lost. Many children who are going to suffer throughout their life as a function of this malnutrition, intense malnutrition at this age. The other thing that strikes me is never said the word Israel. When he's talking about all of these decisions in terms of border crossings, these decisions internally, we know who's making these decisions. This is Israel making these decisions. And they are decisions. And even though he is being too diplomatic, for whatever reasons, that is the case. He's saying there are decisions being made, and there is only one decision maker that is making decisions for every single one of those things he said, and it is Israel. Israel is deciding to stop the trucks internally in Gaza that are going with aid. Israel is the one who is stopping any aid entering into the country in any meaningful manner. Israel is the one who is preventing this aid from reaching people. It's Israel. Every one of those decisions that are causing this famine and starvation is Israel's decision to make.
Because of the nature of this. And I think, just to reiterate for people that may be hearing this kind of thing for the first time or may not be familiar with the dynamics of Gaza. Gaza is and has been considered an open-air prison for decades. Israel controls their borders, land and sea. They control what comes in. They control what comes out. That's why they were able to shut off electricity, water, internet at the beginning. This is not a famine in a country that is sovereign. Gaza, Palestine isn't even a state. They don't have the ability that other nations might have as well. So, like, it's so man-made and so uniquely controlled by Israel that I just don't love. I mean, and look, he's doing great work, right? But we have to be clear about the language that we're using, to Sam's point. These are decisions made by the country that controls this population every part of their lives and has controlled every part of their lives for many years.
And it was predictable in October that this is the direction this was going to go. And like we've spent months saying like, oh, maybe this actually is counterterrorism, what's happening in front of our eyes. And it hasn't been. It's been mass starvation, collective punishment.
We will, I guess, I don't know if we'll, the bottom line is, I think like it remains to be seen now how, the two things to watch over the course of the next couple of days. One is if Blinken certifies that Israel is doing enough. I mean, it's laughable that he could do this with a straight face. But if Blinken certifies that Israel is doing enough in terms of providing humanitarian aid, and signs off on weapons sales, it will the things to watch are A, how that goes down. B, how folks like Chris Van Hollen and apparently there's about anywhere from like 8 to 19 senators, according to a piece in Haaretz, and we don't hear about this in the U.S. for whatever reason, who are at varying degrees talking about cutting off weapon sales to Israel. That is one thing to watch carefully over the next couple of days. And then two, how the U.S. responds to this veto in the UN. If the Biden administration uses it as like, our hands are tied, we tried for a ceasefire resolution and it's Russia and China's fault, then you'll know that they are wrapping this up. In terms of their efforts to slow Israel's roll. The idea that Chuck Schumer could call for a change in Netanyahu's administration in Israel. And then when Mike Johnson says, we're going to invite Netanyahu here, and Chuck Schumer says, well, that's fine. I checked with the Baileys and they'll be happy. Like, this is the problem with the Democrats, broadly speaking. They do not understand, or they're incapable of executing the idea that what they say should be taken seriously by anybody, because they don't take it seriously. Every junior high school student who has taken any type of like government or politics or class, to the extent that they have, understands that when you allow someone to come and address a joint session of Congress, or even when you invite them to come and meet with the president so that they can get some photos, that it is a benefit to them domestically. When Netanyahu shows up here and is able to speak in front of both houses with an invite from the guy who said that he should be gone, the message that Israel gets is they didn't really mean it.
Exactly. They
didn't mean it.
Of course they don't mean it. What if our actions have demonstrated?
I mean, it's just like
we won't cut off aid.
Like, who does Chuck Schumer think he's fooling? Like, what idiot is paying attention to this and going like, well, you got to give Chuck Schumer credit for calling out Netanyahu and also inviting him to come and speak and basically have one of the highest honors that is allowed to really just about, I don't know, how many joint sessions of Congress has a leader of a foreign country spoken to? I mean, over the past 2 decades.
Well, I mean,
Netanyahu was one of them.
Yeah.
But I mean, how many others?
Our relationship with Israel is not one that is like normal in terms of diplomacy. We are the butler for Israel's colonialism on the international stage, and we ate it. I mean, just in these like
Financiers.
in these little minute ways too, with the language about warfare and offensive, and even ceasefire. You know, I'm the movement for a ceasefire is wonderful, but even that concept, like as if this is a symmetrical warfare
Continued Nakba.
between these two parties that have agency, as opposed to a wholesale slaughter of civilians.
Wikipedia calls it the Israel-Gaza war.
That's what I hear every time, and I want to pull my hair out because it's not a war. It never has been a war. The Hamas attack was a response to the systemic rolling violence of Israel taking this territory for decades. And then this reaction is their, dare I say, final solution. And I can't, it's fascinating to me to see how slow people are to realize that having a guy like Netanyahu come and speak, historically, what is that going to look like? He's going to be spoken about in the way that we speak about all of these other major leaders that have committed genocide in our world. I mean, this is one of the most evil people on the planet right now.
And this would be the fourth time that Netanyahu will have addressed a joint session. The last time was in March of 2015. As of then, I don't believe this has changed. But Winston Churchill was the only other former leader to have addressed a joint session 3 times.
Who also was exterminationist
Zelensky.
against Palestinians. But.
Zelensky had a joint session address. And I mean, this is a big mechanism to show support.
Yes.
I mean, that's what it's about.
Exactly.
And it should be read as that. And all the hemming and hawing, until it actually shows a change happening in the world with regards to restraining Israel, it's trivia.
And I just one more point on this, but read that really quickly.
Well, link in bio on the IM says Rutgers, I assume that means Reuters, is reporting the language as, quote, called for an immediate and sustained ceasefire lasting for roughly 6 weeks that would protect civilians and allow for the delivery of a humanitarian instance. So why cover an activist before it was introduced? America bad? Well, ding dong, you have proved our point that the way this is being reported in the American press is deceiving. And I'm assuming you're asking this in good faith, but I'm just doing that for the sake of argument.
Yeah.
The proposal backs the imperative, that's a quote, for an immediate and sustained ceasefire to protect all civilians on all sides. The imperative, which differed from previous draft resolutions vetoed by Washington, which demanded an unconditional ceasefire. If you know anything about international law, you know that it doesn't really exist, right? It is really just sort of like more of like a compact.
Yeah.
And the difference between demand or saying it's really important, even it's the most important thing that can be done, is dramatic. Demand is an order. Imperative is a suggestion. And it is like the difference between me saying to my son, go clean the dishes versus, hey, why don't you clean the dishes? Because when I say, why don't you clean the dishes? He goes, because I've got other things to do.
Yeah. And okay, so to your point, just really briefly on the Democrats' political malfeasance here, like, or incompetence as well. What would be incredibly useful would be to tie this genocidal maniac Netanyahu to the Republican Party. The public opinion's not going to go up for Israel. It's precipitously going down. And it will, especially among young people, it's gone. But it will continue to do so as we get real numbers. Like, we have no idea how many people are dead. We have no idea. The numbers of 32,000 haven't been updated in weeks, and famine and starvation is rampant right now.
6-figure starving.
Yes. So if you want to actually use this politically from an entirely cynical perspective, Mike Johnson and Mitch McConnell are gleeful, like, oh, it's so shameful that Schumer would say something like that. Please come speak to us. Please come speak to us, genocidal maniac who will be spoken about like Hitler of this time of the 21st century at one point. Come speak to us, please. And public sentiment is rapidly changing. Why would you not tie Netanyahu to the Republicans and say, this freak, these Christian Zionists, they're insane. They want the Jews to return to the Holy Land to fulfill some prophecy where a majority of them get burned up and Jesus comes back again. They're psychopaths. Like, and you don't even need to go that far, but basically say this is what these freaks support. This is a difference.
Well, I mean, Biden's not going to do that because he doesn't want to. I mean, because he's allied with Netanyahu. So, like, the idea that it's, But
Schumer, it's the incongruence of what Schumer did, too. It's the
Schumer
Democrats.
thinks he's being, like, cute. That's all. He just thinks he's being cute. But the point is that, like, the audience for what Schumer said the other day is exactly the audience that will know that he okayed Netanyahu coming. I mean, we're not talking. I mean, the fact is that broadly speaking, even though we see these numbers, broadly speaking, this is not the numbers of people that they are suffering with. It is harming Biden with the youth vote, without a doubt, and it is definitely implicating the sort of enthusiasm of the people who are supposed to be going out and supporting them. But they think the administration, Schumer, who again has been one of the biggest supporters of Israel and in this country, at least within the context of the Democratic leadership, they think they can sort of like be cutesy with this, and that also has the impact of like saying like, oh, remember this? We telling you that that democracy is at stake in this administration, in this vote come fall. Well, it's not so problematic that we're not afraid to be cutesy about it. I mean, what they're doing. I don't care what your perspective is. If you are against Donald Trump, what they're doing is basically just trying to see how far out onto this sort of frozen pond they can walk. And they keep taking a step after step after step to see if they can take these little baby steps and don't know how thick the ice is. And at one point, and maybe it already has happened, they've fallen through and we don't even know yet. We're not going to know until the fall. All right, let's turn to what's going on in the House today. The government, a significant portion of the government is set to shut down tonight. And it was unclear whether the budget bill could pass. Again, reminder, there is a rider on this that defunds UNRWA for until 2025. The vote just took place a couple minutes ago. Democrats voted for the bill, 185. And we should also be clear that it was brought in via suspension of the rules because Mike Johnson can't get Republicans to vote in a majority for anything. So
can't get it out of committee.
He can't get it out of committee, can't go through the regular process. That means that when you suspend the rules, it needs 2/3. Democrats voted for the bill, 185 in favor, 22 against. I think a lot of those 22, I don't know the specifics, but a significant portion of them are voting against it because of the UNRWA funding.
Gutting.
And 101 to 112 voted, Republicans voted for this bill. Let's get this clip. It's
which one are you thinking of?
Here's Chip Roy explaining why he was not going to vote on Real America's Voice yesterday.
Republican leadership refuses to use leverage to fight for those things. Look, you understand deal making. Former President Trump understands deal making. You can't get everything you want. None of us would say you can. But dadgummit, we should get at least something significant in the fight. We should use our leverage. And Mike Johnson blew it when he walked away from a continuing resolution that we could have extended through this year to trigger the caps that we had put in place last year. And we would have forced Democrats to the table and then leverage this. The other thing he could have done, pass a CR today that kicks this into May, trigger Thomas Massey's 1% provision. Then you force Democrats to the table and say, guys, we're not going to do any of this unless we actually secure the border. But now we're getting yet another promise. Trust me, Chip, we'll secure the border when we do a supplemental on Ukraine funding. Look, most of your audience doesn't want another dollar to go to Ukraine at all. Republican leaders.
All right, so a couple of points here. One, it's tough for them to argue they want border funding because they rejected that already.
Also, this has increased Department of Homeland Security, border security, and enforcement funding in it.
And Trump would never allow Chip and his friends to vote for the border security. But the other is this. The 1% across the board reduction in spending would hit the Pentagon. And because the Pentagon gets so much money, 1% is a significant sum for them. I think it's like, what would that be? Like, we get $900 billion approximately.
So we're close to $1 billion then.
Yeah, close to
right?
Close to is it 900 million? That is. Just get me the exact number on the budget number, but it's way up there. I don't know what 1% of that is, but they don't want that 1%. There's a lot of Republicans that do not want those cuts as well. There's certainly some Democrats, but I think at least you'd get close to 50-50 on Democrats being like, well, that's a trade-off. It would hit discretionary spending as well. Nobody wants that 1% across the board. And also, incidentally, it's the dumbest way to possibly budget for anything. And everybody knows that.
Really shows the fascist capture of anti-war sentiment to like, a lot of people are opposed to Ukraine aid. And what is the reason? It's like this idea that we're not doing enough fascism on the border
right.
With the money instead.
Right. Oh my God. My math must have been very, very dumb. 1% of 900 billion is 9 billion. So thank you, Kevin from Cali. Well, I should not ever offer to do math on the fly. That is not. Know your strengths.
And of course, the Pentagon has, or I should say, defense spending is spread out in almost every person's district around the country, and they don't want going into an election to have all of a sudden all these jobs cut because of these cuts. All right, and then this happened. Marjorie Taylor Greene. We don't have a video. We just have a tweet. Okay, here's Marjorie Taylor Greene. And at one point during, I don't know if it was during the debate or exactly when, Marjorie Taylor Greene basically puts a motion to vacate and wanted to basically, here she explains why she did it. And I will just say, put up this picture before we even roll it, and you can see why she did it.
Oh, yes. Yeah, visual evidence here.
This is, why did Marjorie Taylor Greene do this? Here is the, we don't even need to hear an explanation. Yeah, I want you to roll the video in a second, but just look at this picture with all the cameras around her, and now you know why Marjorie Taylor Greene did this.
Actualized her dream.
Exactly. This worked perfectly, is what she's about to say. No. She's saying she's warning Mike Johnson. But go.
As with rules and promises to the American people that we would bring regular order back to Congress, Speaker Johnson has betrayed that by passing 3 CRs and then forcing us to pass or to vote on a 2-part omnibus, the second one being today. He also only gave us, I don't even know how, we had 1 day basically to read 1,012 pages, breaking the 72-hour rule. This is a betrayal of the American people. This is a betrayal of Republican voters. And the bill that we were forced to vote on forced Republicans to choose between funding to pay our soldiers and in doing so, funding late-term abortion. This bill was basically a dream and a wish list for Democrats and for the White House. It was completely led by Chuck Schumer, not our Republican Speaker of the House, not our conference, and we weren't even allowed to put amendments to the floor to have a chance to make changes to the bill. I filed the motion to vacate today, but it's more of a warning and a pink slip. I respect our conference. I've paid all my dues to my conference. I'm a member in good standing, and I do not wish to inflict pain on our conference and to throw the House in chaos. But this is basically a warning, and it's time for us to go through the process, take our time, and find a new Speaker of the House that will stand with Republicans and our Republican majority instead of standing with the Democrats.
So apparently, Jake Sherman says that on a motion to vacate, she would have had to go to the mic and call up the resolution. Then the leadership can delay the vote for 2 legislative days. That would put this until after recess, 2+ weeks from now. But she would have had to ask for privilege, and otherwise it's just something that, sits around. But she didn't do that, and she explains that there. So it was basically a symbolic motion of discontent from Mike Johnson.
Didn't they just vote on it? Did you just send what is this 286 134 vote?
That's the budget vote.
Oh, that's the budget vote.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So they didn't do.
Okay.
She didn't privilege this. So it's
they haven't voted on it. And they will.
And they may not. Like, the point is, she said this is a pink slip, right? And she would have to prioritize.
Well, but the bottom line is, she said she was doing it as a warning shot. Well, what I don't understand.
Yeah.
Like, now he did exactly what you said he shouldn't do.
But I got attention for it.
That's exactly it.
The warning is that
yes.
I'm going to continue to have people surround me with microphones until America gives up.
And then
I get 8 different news reporters from like 24 different news agencies can come to me this morning.
And she'll get a bunch of campaign donations, by the way. That's part of what makes her an actual bigwig in the Republican Party, because she has a small dollar fundraising operation that is much more profitable.
I think she's like number 2 or 3 in fundraising in the entire caucus.
With McCarthy out, she might be 1, honestly.
Yeah.
But hey, I mean, look, the Republican voters are not Donald Trump. Just kidding, they're Marjorie Taylor Greene.
All right, let's. We got a bunch of other news I want to get to as well before we get that. So, but as it stands now, it looks like the government is not going to shut down tonight. This bill will go to the Senate. They will pass it. But again, this UNRWA pause, moratorium and funding over the next really 12 months, more or less, is grotesque. And it's going to lead to the deaths of thousands, maybe more. We will update that in the coming days. In the meantime, I want to get to this Frank Luntz thing for a moment, and then we'll get into what the Republicans in there, because this is I'm enjoying this. Donald Trump owes a $450 million fine, which is probably closer to $500 million because he owes interest on it already.
It ticks up every day,
and he's getting good rates on interest, just going the wrong direction.
Yeah, right.
And here is Frank Luntz, the ethically and follically challenged Frank Luntz, who, reminder, was censured by, if you didn't know that there was a pollster association, well, they censured him years ago for his Newt Gingrich contract with America malfeasance. And here he is, pretending that somehow, and this is illustrative because this is what the Democrats worry about. If Donald Trump is actually held to account, that there'll be some type of blowback. This is one of the stupidest takes I've ever seen. But here he is, so-called pollster Frank Luntz.
All right, Frank, the politics of this. Folks in the Biden campaign are already starting to refer to Donald Trump as broke Don, which is interesting. And then there is the possibility that the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, would start seizing assets, maybe even buildings. How do you think that would play?
I want you to remember this moment, and don't forget it. If the New York Attorney General starts to take his homes away, starts to seize his assets.
Pause it for
it's
1
all
second.
gonna be
I
on
just want to be clear. They are seizing right now. She is filed in Westchester County to take one of his golf courses away, and then like a undeveloped, I guess, another project that he's done, and they're going to start with that. So I want you to remember this moment. This is the moment that Frank Luntz just completely lied and made up a complete delusion that the American public is going to be outraged at this wealthy guy's golf club, private golf club, getting seized.
It's funny. I was wondering if it was the golf club that I've driven past occasionally, and no, it's a different one. So he's got golf clubs to seize.
They're all over the place.
It's not the one by the bridge. No.
No. Go ahead.
Starts to take his homes away, starts to seize his assets. It's all going to be on camera. Pundits are going to sit there and scream about this. This man cannot be elected. You're going to create the greatest victimhood of 2024, and you're going to elect Donald Trump. If they take his stuff, he's going to say that this is proof that the federal government and the establishment and the swamp in Washington and all the politicians across the country and the attorneys generals and all of this, that this is a conspiracy to deny him the presidency. He's going to go up in the polls just like he went up every single time they indicted him. The indictment, let's not talk about whether it's justified or not, but it will prove the things that he's saying on the campaign trail, and he will go up, and it may just elect him president. Do not forget that. And I say this to the Attorney General right now. If you play politics on this, this is what the secretaries of state did in Colorado and what they did in, I believe, was Maine. His numbers went up in both states. I don't understand. I'm almost speechless in how pathetic the opposition to Trump has been and how completely misguided. And this is a perfect example of it.
Okay. Here's the difference. She is an attorney general, and she brought this in front of a court. Now, here's the thing. You're arguing that Donald Trump is a lawbreaker. That's the argument. How do you prove that notion to the average voter? Do you do it by having there be no consequences for any of his actions? That doesn't make sense. If you've broken the law, we register. Again, this is like the theory that I've always had about like reaction shots in movies. How do you need to communicate to the audience some cue as to how they should react to a certain action that you have shown. And the cue for the audience to react is to show the person being punished. That is why perpetrators cover their heads when they are on a perp walk. That is why people don't want to generally, release the footage of them going to prison. And the idea that Luntz has, it is true within the Republican Party. It went on to raise his poll numbers against Ron DeSantis. But there's no evidence it raises his poll standings against
why would
against
it be
that.
In a general.
Why would it be appropriate for a district attorney to even calculate that?
The attorney general should not be considering politics.
They shouldn't be saying, "Oh, the polls in these other states went up, so I guess I need to not."
Of
press.
course,
Like, that's
of
insane.
course.
Well,
of course.
it's political because
That would make it political if they have an eye on the polls.
100%.
You know what? Tish. You know where her allegiance lies, if you know what I mean. Tish James. I didn't know that was a toupee of his. That's.
Oh my God. Are you kidding?
No, I mean, I guess I just never considered someone who had that much money wouldn't have just like sprung for a transplant or something. But anyway, it'll be very, very satisfying if his properties begin to get seized.
And the idea
the bald
that
eagle
people
will
are
die,
going to feel bad. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
He no longer controls the thing. We should say that today, his completely fraudulent valuation for the going public of Truth Social and Trump media at something like $3 billion. The operation has revenue of $1 million.
Where did they get that valuation?
Well, this is the thing
Out of
about
their
value.
ass.
You can make up your valuation. That's what they do all the time. There's some standards that people will base it off of, and it's just an argument.
Kevin O'Leary would say that calling that into question would be hampering, business, because no one's doing anything wrong. It's a victimless crime when you evaluate your worthless company at whatever.
But the point about, you're going to be reading that Trump has something like $3 billion worth of stock value in the Truth Social. The problem is that no one believes that the stock is worth that.
Yeah.
People want to buy it. People definitely want to buy this valuation.
Well,
my personal
the
blog.
problem that he's going to have is he's going to say to a bank, I'll put up $2.5 billion worth of this stock for you to loan me 450 or whatever, 500 million. And the bank's going to go, dude, your stock's not worth that.
Yeah.
Like
right.
I would say your stock is worth probably like $30 million maybe. And that's really just more like your gold sneakers.
Is that
like,
or his gold toilet, which when it gets seized,
no,
it will be the worst day in America.
My point is like, it might be fun to own the stock in the same way it's like, oh, I got a
Trump NFT.
I got a Coke. I got one of those Coca-Cola cans from when they rolled out new Coke. It's just like a collector's item. But it ain't worth. No bank is going to say, okay, we'll take this. I mean, it would be.
Is he trying to dupe people into actually like investing before they, go public with Truth Social?
I think the idea is that he wants to use the stock as collateral for this loan. It's not going to work. And here is Donald Trump's attorney. What's her first name?
Alina Habba.
Alina Habba.
Who went to my high school. 10 years ahead of me, but rough for Kent Place School for Girls.
Here is the question as to like where Trump is going to be getting this money. And he won't, folks. He really won't. I think we're going to see seizure start next week, but we'll see.
Is there any effort on the part of your team to secure this money through another country, Saudi Arabia or Russia, as Joy Behar seems to think?
Well, there's rules and regulations that are public. I can't speak about strategy that require certain things, and we have to follow those rules. Like I said, this is manifest injustice. It is impossible. It's an impossibility. I believe they knew that. I think that's why mid-trial, frankly, they changed their ask from $250 million to the ridiculous amount of money that they've asked for. I think everything is done intentionally. I do not doubt that the witch hunt, that the election interference goal is what was ringing steady and loudly and true throughout all these trials, frankly. And we're seeing it. It's the demise of our country, not the demise of Trump. So we'll handle it as we always have and keep our heads up and keep working hard.
There you go.
The idea, and I see some even leftists say like the Democrats are going the wrong way about this. Again, like it's completely inappropriate for people to look at polls like that. But this is what happens when a criminal runs for high office and makes a bunch of enemies. Like this is really not surprising. If you know anything about Trump before he was in politics, like it's a liability. Yeah, it becomes more of a liability once you take political power. That's why a lot of really rich, powerful people don't get involved in politics.
I mean, remember when Nancy Pelosi was making that argument about Bush with Iraq, right? Which is essentially like, we can't hold him accountable, right? Because they were afraid, if I'm not mistaken, weren't they afraid of the political blowback?
Well, I think they were afraid of the idea of impeachment would in some way empower him. I mean,
but that's insane. That's an insane way to think about things. And it's
these are people who grew up and their mentors all basically said, like, it really hurt with Nixon. Nixon, the Republicans came roaring back.
It helped Clinton.
That's the point. Getting impeached helped Clinton, and that's what they're afraid of.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I mean, that's what they're afraid of.
I guess that's true. But that's because it was bullshit.
Well, I think
it's
American
whether
public
it helps or not for like this legal sort of consideration.
Yeah. Of course. You have to hold people to account. You have to do it. And certainly you have to do it if you're saying that they broke the law.
It's obvious to everybody that they break the law.
Yeah.
All right.
Don't fly too close to the sun. It's a little thing called Icarus. Okay, Trump?
We've got I got a lot more stuff to get to. We want to get through this Republican study committed budget proposal. Worst case scenario, we get to it on Tuesday, because we also, Candace Owens is no longer with the Daily Wire, so that's also big news.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick break and want to bring in. Do we have Jason? Okay. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with Jason Myles from This Is Revolution. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. Want to welcome back to the program Jason Myles from This Is Revolution, and also Sublation Magazine.
Sublation, and don't forget Damage Magazine as well. I also write
and Damage Magazine. Jason, you should first off know that Kowalski from Nebraska is very proud of you, and I'm unclear why. But he says it would be helpful knowing coming from him. All right, let's talk about your piece here. You quoted John Bon Jovi.
I did. Never thought I would do that in my life.
There you go.
Not a Bon Jovi fan at all.
What prompted you to quote John Bon Jovi?
I try to write my pieces around music titles, and I was thinking about the Talking Heads. And I wanted to call the piece Same As It Ever Was, but I didn't want to necessarily start it with that quote. And I was making a playlist of 80s glam metal for no good reason. And some Bon Jovi stuff kind of showed up there. And I was thinking about that song, Wanted Dead or Alive, with that line. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to start the piece off with the most ridiculous thing ever. And I did it.
It's all the same. Only the names will change every day. It seems we're wasting away.
Mm-hmm.
Waste in away.
Waste in. Yeah.
What has not changed, and what do we think what do we think has changed?
So I'll try to be as brief as possible. I live in Mexico, but my children live in the United States, in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I'm from. And I drive up as often as possible to see them and to see family. And there's a part of California that I get stuck in where my phone dies and I have to listen to conservative radio for a few hours. It's in the central part of the I-5 drive, and it happens every time. And I've been consuming an obscene amount of right-wing content. And
who are you listening to these days?
What's in rotation?
There's two shows. So, oh God, I'm so mad at all of you people on the screen. So there's either a religious right-wing show, the national right-wing show, and I forget that guy's name, Mark
Levin.
Mark Levin.
Hey, dummy, get off this air.
A beautiful sounding voice. I can see why you like to subject yourself to it.
Oh my God, it is so bad. And then there's the local right-wingers on this. So there's no diversity of thought whatsoever. It's just
it's format purity is what it's called.
Is that what it's called? Format purity? Well, format purity lasts from about Bakersfield to the edge of Fresno County when you're hitting almost the outskirts of the Bay Area, the kind of hinterlands, as we would call it, of the Bay Area. And then that's when, my phone's finally charged and maybe I can get a friend on the phone or something. But there were just some portrayals that these guys had, definitely of crime and of immigration, that I felt were not honest. And they always lack context. And what's the same is that on a bipartisan level, Democrats and Republicans are not the biggest fans of open borders. And I live near the border and I get to see what it looks like. And it definitely doesn't look like the way it's described in right-wing media. And I also felt like I don't know if the left has a proper response other than this kind of a generic liberal response to immigration and crime as well. And I felt like these two things that were victories in 2020 for the Democratic Party were now being used as failures in 2024.
Failures by, okay, well, how were they, in what way were they victories for the Democratic Party? And then let's talk about how they're being used as failures.
You want to go with immigration, start off with that?
Sure.
If you think about Trump's very, very strict Remain policy, the first thing we started to see in 2018 was those pens that were built and just shoving kids in there, right? We're gonna systematically separate children from whatever adult they're with. We're gonna throw them in these pens.
And you make the point in the piece that the Obama administration did this, but they only did it in instances where there was some significant evidence that the adult the children had come in with was, let's say, was committing a crime beyond crossing the border without documentation, was bringing in drugs or
wasn't the parent,
that type of thing.
Yeah. Which happens.
What the Trump administration did is they said anybody who comes across with kids is necessarily violating the law, therefore we separate them. And so it was on a whole different level process.
It was disgusting. But what you saw in that moment was a few things that happened. Number one, people saw children suffering or even heard children suffering, right? When these news stories came out. And I remember I worked a music festival in El Paso, Texas. Neon Desert is what it's called. And I remember I came there right before that, or right around the time that stuff was happening. And there was throngs of volunteers, giving blankets, trying to help with the kids. People really wanted to get involved because it's a horrible thing to see children suffering. When you see these kids getting pulled from their parents, it's a horrible thing to see, right? Much like what you guys are talking about with Israel and Gaza, right? There's been a shift in the way people understand that, mainly because you see images of dead children, crying parents. No one wants to see that. I run into conservative people all the time that say things like, this is too much. So the messaging changed, the way people were interpreting it changed, and everybody wanted a better policy, and Trump was the bad guy. Trump has also made himself really easy to hate when it came to immigration. So even though the Trump regime tried to paint this as these caravans of people, you know, at one point in time, you even had Geraldo Rivera talking about, hey, these caravans aren't caravans of terrorists. These are people that are making 1,000-mile journeys, you know, to get away from something. And you have to think about that for a second. What are you getting away from that you're wanting to walk in a jungle? You know, I get scared to walk, and if my water is out here, which happens often, I'm not walking on the other side of my house to flip on the well power because I don't know what crazy scorpion or snake is going to jump out. So you're talking about people that are, you know, crossing jungles and deserts, you know, to leave bad situations. They're not just doing that because they're terrorists or they just want to, you know, take your job, quote unquote. They're trying to, you know, flee bad situations. They are, you know, refugees in every sense of the word. And for a moment, there was a consensus that accepted that. You started to have these things called sanctuary cities, right? Where I'm from in the Bay Area, definitely declared themselves a sanctuary city. Chicago did some really great fights to make their city a true sanctuary city, which means you're not just saying it in rhetorical name, but you're literally saying we're not going to turn over information to federal authorities.
Yep.
And there's only a few places that really did that. But that narrative has started to change. And there was a strategy that Trump tried to do, but even his people were like, I don't know if it's legal. And that was, you know what, F these quote unquote liberal cities, and let's drop off just busloads of migrants and see how they like it. That doesn't happen until, was it like 2020? And Abbott, we just did a show with the great Cedric Johnson Tuesday, where we talked about what's going on in Chicago, where they've dropped off 80,000 people. These are human beings in Chicago, and it's caused a bit of an uproar with the Black community because now the way it's being presented is a fight over resources.
Yeah.
So where immigration was a winning strategy because you could point at the bad guy that's doing the bad thing, even though bad guys are still doing bad things with human beings. Is it the winning strategy this time around? I don't think so.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things that strike me. One, there was a lot of data that showed that Trump was polarizing enough that people became far more, they saw immigration, race, other issues within this sort of like paradigm that was either, you know, if it aligns with Trump, then it's bad. If it is contrary to Trump, then it's good. And we saw people do that, right? I mean, we saw that with, you know, the Muslim ban. We saw that with a bunch of different things. And you're right in terms of the immigration thing. And it seems like the Democratic Party has decided to wave the white flag and move closer to that sort of anti-immigrant position, right? I mean, that was what that basically that border proposal was by Biden. So what are we talking about here? Is this a problem with the parties or a problem with the American public?
I mean, I think the American public dissects information the way it's presented to them, first and foremost. And I think we have to understand that. I think, you know, everybody likes to just yell out Chomsky manufacturing consent. It's like, I get what you're trying to say, but, you know, also understand, how are you taking in the information that you're consuming and how is it being presented to you? And then how does that information try to change public opinion? So again, let's go back to the before 2020. Public opinion is kids in cages bad. But we're not really still talking about immigration and how we like it, because ultimately both parties don't really care. They love the fight, right? Both parties love telling you how many people they've deported. I don't remember if I quoted it in the piece because I did read quite a few articles on that because I wanted to kind of go back to that time. and read what people were saying. But, the Obama administration had no problem bragging about the amount of people that they were deporting.
No, he would say they would do this. In fact, that was an explicit strategy. They thought that if they could show record deportations, that they could get DACA and DAPA and do a comprehensive immigration bill. And it's the same argument that supposedly, I don't know if Biden's making it with sincerity. Like, if I really cozy up to Netanyahu, he'll listen to me when I say, please don't kill as many children. And that, of course, is absurd. I almost don't even think. I think the Obama administration was sincere in their thinking that was going to work because they were so captured by that sort of democratic mind virus.
But at least they had DACA, right? Like, at least the Obama administration was gesturing later
in the administration, when they realized, like, oh, wait a second, we don't have anybody to negotiate. When he was a lame duck, he started doing more administrative stuff and more executive actions.
But my point is just that Biden is only proposing more militancy at the border compared to maybe there was more of, I think, a sensitivity to wanting the Latino vote from the Democratic Party with Obama than there is with Biden. That's just my read on it. But
DACA is a complicated situation because I don't think people really understand that there's not a lot of pathways to citizenship within DACA, and there's tons of limitations. And even if you look at what's going on in California, there was going to be a bill where undocumented students could get jobs, and then that changed. So,
well, let's be clear here. Yeah. DACA is an executive action that is taken. When I say DACA, it was Obama that basically created DACA, which is we're just going to delay. We're going to delay deportation so long that, folks, we have downgraded it and you're safe. And then Trump was going to reverse that. Biden has reinstated it. But the idea was that we were going to get a legislative version, which would have provided anybody who came in those circumstances, not that we're taking discretion on applying the law, the deportation, actions against you, but rather you're here and you're a citizen. It was a way
to, right. It's you're here. You can't vote. You don't have a lot of rights. You can't get a lot of services.
Right now, DACA is that way. But the idea, the legislative fix was to basically say, we're going to make you citizens.
And you had to qualify for it. So it was only certain people that could qualify for it. It was a very democratic PMC program.
I'm not heralding the program. It's completely. I mean, my point was just that the to your point, Jason,
from there.
We've backslid.
Well, what I wanted to say though about the whole same as it ever was is what the Obamas of the world do is I'll signal to you that I'm on your side, but I'm winking to across the aisle that I'm still doing the job of deporting these people. And there's such a barrier for citizenship. Yeah. Now you have a captured labor force.
That's exactly it, Jason. We've talked about, it's kind of prescient that you're on today, because yesterday on the show, I had John Washington, who wrote the book, The Case for Open Borders, on the program. Yeah. And it's a really good book. And it's just like reimagining our conversations about the border. We keep hearing about this crisis on the border. But the way that our borders have been constructed over the past 50, 60 years is a fairly new phenomenon, right? I mean, and we're seeing this across Europe as well, with Giorgia Meloni defunding the organizations that save migrants from drowning in the sea. This is kind of the new frontier, in my view, of fascism, of this border militance. And as migration continues to increase due to political realities, and then also there will be some climate migration as well, this is only going to get worse. And to your point, Biden, and Sam and I have talked about this at length, Biden has done absolutely nothing, and he's actually done active harm to to imagining a future and to reorienting the conversation, because liberals are now talking about there's a crisis at the border, we got to do something about it, as opposed to it's like, no, our existing systems are in crisis because they're deeply, deeply immoral and ineffective.
And what happens, though, to the conversation when it's presented to the public at one point is there's a crisis at the border because they're locking up children in cages and they're separating from their parents. Oh, my God, I can't wait to go help. And then it turns into, well, there's some pretty bad hombres crossing the border. And it's not just, from the right wing radio, it's like it's not just Latinos, it's people from Afghanistan and the Chinese. And I'm like, I don't know where these people are coming from.
Well, there is, in fact, there is a piece in the New York Times right now. Some reporters have gone down there to talk to people who have gone to the Darien Gap, to right wing, people I don't recognize their names, but they are right. Yeah, this is it. Right wing,
Laura Loomer.
That's
Laura Loomer.
Oh, that is Laura Loomer. They're going down and they're shooting a video down there to see. And there are, one of the ways that people migrate without documentation into this country, if they're coming from, not from Central America or Latin America, is to fly there. To get a cheap flight and then to hope to cross that way. And we, there are Chinese, there are Afghanistan, there are people from all around the world. The other half of undocumented in this country have just overstayed a visa, flown in with papers and stayed, longer than they should have. But so what? What can be done here? And you also draw a parallel to the defund movement.
Oh yeah.
You're right. And of course, we're seeing crime drop precipitously right now. But and we're seeing that the rise in crime was supposedly a function of all of the defunding that took place. But you wrote, while numerous city governments agreed in principle to decrease police budgets, the defund movement was always a neoliberal project. It was never reimagining of policing, but simply moving a decimal point on a spreadsheet. Fewer traditional armed cops for social workers and more mental health professionals, ultimately a nicer police force to tell the unruly and unhoused to move along, maybe provide a service, but these unarmed people would be able to move the blight and poverty without all the sirens and in some cases guns. And then you go on to cite only 2 of 100 police departments that ABC studied had actually decreased their budgets. But everywhere else it went up. 2 things. One, why? In what way was the defund movement only a neoliberal project? Because I'm not sure I agree with it.
We're not talking about reimagining law enforcement, even though that's kind of how people wanted to frame it. We're really talking about taking people that don't work in the law enforcement sector, which are mental health professionals, and now treating them like law enforcement. We're just replacing you, number one, calling you a different name. We're going to move a decimal point over on a spreadsheet, right? That's really what it was about.
But is that true, though? Because I think the idea was, let's narrow the portfolio in the statutory portfolio in which police can respond. So, there will be rules. We don't send, for instance, police to, check if there's a gas leak. We don't send police if somebody has a heart attack. We don't send police if, name some other services where we don't send police. And the idea would be, we're going to take some of the circumstances where we do send police and not send police, send other people.
But they're acting as police, though.
Well, but
you're talking about heart attacks and gas leaks. We're talking about, let's say, spousal abuse. These are common calls that law enforcement gets.
Well, I think the idea was if there is a question of someone who is acting strangely, instead of the police getting called in that situation, or even saying do we need guys with guns to do traffic violations? Maybe we don't. Maybe that cuts down on the violence and it cuts down on what the agenda is. The idea would be to change it from a situation where things could be violent to a situation where we would add social services.
Again, it ends up being like CPS, right? That's who you call when there's a kid problem. And CPS is pretty much the kid police. It doesn't sound fun, but that's what they are. It's a rough job. I've known people that did it, and I know people that left it. It's not fun.
Right.
And I worked in services. I worked in unhoused services and lived amongst them for a long time. Lived in a van for a minute myself. So if there's anyone that understands potential overreach of law enforcement, I think I do. I was talking with a friend who also works in services. We work at the same shelter and we went to school together. Good friend. Someone got murdered on her site, and it wasn't by law enforcement. It was by bounty hunters. She didn't know. So they were cops because they had to
get all buffed out,
all the stuff out, and they were all jacked up. The dude had a warrant. You know, he skipped bail, obviously. Wasn't the best, but no one deserves to be executed, right? And it's a fucked up situation in certain environments.
Right.
And as someone that's worked in an environment where you go, I don't want to call the cops. This person has a team of mental health professionals. That's a thing that existed before people were even gave a damn about a hashtag.
Right.
And I remember a Friday, there was a woman who was being unruly, and there's rules. You have security on site. Security is not allowed to touch anybody. Seems really pointless. Their job is to observe and call the cops if need be. And this woman was a smaller woman, but she had a knife and she was threatening some people and she had kicked somebody's dog. And I was trying to de-escalate the situation, which is a wonderful word people love to use. But until you're really in a situation where it's like, I have to literally remove you from, I have to hold you or push you or something. And, you know, we can lose our jobs for that. We can get in a lot of trouble for that. And I'm not making a lot of money, right? And I call the team that was supposed to respond to this woman. And it was 4 something on a Friday. And the team was already really young. It was really, really young people. And the person on the phone, the dispatcher, was like, you said she has a knife? I was like, yeah, I'll call the cops. I was like, but I don't want to call the cops. He's like,
right,
dude, we're not coming. It's 4 something on a Friday. We're not coming.
Oh, Jesus.
Now, I'm not saying all resources act that way, because in a perfect world, not even in a perfect world, the world we want is the world where there can be a team of professionals that can come help that situation.
Right.
That don't have guns, right? That being said, it ended up getting de-escalated because another woman that I was friends with in the shelter, who was kind of an OG, was able to take the woman aside. And it was a horrible situation. The woman was getting beat by the dude who got her into the shelter in the first place. So the only place that she had to stay was with a dude that was already beating her ass and pimping her out. You know, it's everything about it is ugly. But it's reality, and we have to figure out how we want to deal with it. And
but but as a system, like, you know, what is the way that you deal with that? I mean, as a systematic response, like, fortunately you're there.
Yeah.
You're calling and saying, like, I don't want to call the cops.
Yeah.
But some other guy who makes that same call will be like, yeah, actually, I called the cops first. I didn't even call them. Like, but as a system, Like what? Like what?
And that, you know what, Sam? That happened more often than not, actually, where people called the cops the moment something happened. I remember there was one moment where there was a couple, and the boyfriend he was a very large dude, but he was really quiet. But apparently, when he would get into their room, he was super violent, and we didn't know about it. And you only have 5 or 6 counselors in this building. Was an old hotel, so it had like 350 people in it. So imagine you got like 6 counselors and a small handful of us to handle 350 people with 350 problems. And this young man, who was actually, the sad part was he was kind of cool. He would just go in the room and get tweaked out and just beat holes in the wall around her. He'd hit her, and she finally gathered the courage, because we would never see her. She finally gathered the courage, and she was shaking. And she comes down, excuse me if I get a little emotional. She comes down and she goes, "I need you to remove, my guy." And we're like, "Okay, what's going on?" And she's like, "Hit me, and I want you to call the police." Okay. We call the police. Police always come in, ask you what the situation is. They very calmly took dude out. Now, I can sit here for the next hour and tell you guys stories about dudes that came in, beat the hell out of somebody, back and forth and back and forth. You had to remove people. You didn't want to remove people. I'm not saying this to say get rid of these things. I'm not saying this to say that we need more police. And if that's what you gather from it, that's a really oversimplification. You're not really listening. These are the uncomfortable things that get under your fingernails. These are the uncomfortable conversations that we have to have truly about these these things, because hashtags are simple.
No, I get that. I mean, I get that. I'm still not like 100% sure. I have a sense of like, what is...
what do you... I would love to see, whenever we would get people that would come in there that were like, quote unquote, lefty, because when you work in services, you work with all kind of people,
Right.
And most people are apolitical at best. And most people that would identify as something that we would they would leave in like a couple weeks, because you're the enemy to the people you're trying to help.
Sure.
So what's your vision for how community investment could look better?
I think, first of all, we have to understand that it's going to be ugly. Eggs have to be broken to make the omelet. It's going to get ugly, and you can't throw the baby out. It means you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like you're going to have places like the situation where my friend works, where it's a housing unit I forget how many people it houses, but it's probably going to be violent there for a while before it gets better. And that's the hard part, to try to get to people. Like, this might be ugly. This isn't a simple solution. You don't give somebody a house and they go thanks, and then they just stop doing the shit that got them homeless in the first place.
Right. Okay. I mean,
not everybody wants to accept services. Number one.
Right.
Do you want to be a society that forces services on people? There's a law that just passed in California, right? Proposition 1, much like what you guys have in New York, where you're kind of forcing people that are mentally ill into treatment. Is that what we want to do?
No. I don't think people, when they talk about guaranteed housing, thinks it's going to solve all the horror that you're describing. I mean, I think your point is...
I believe people really believe that.
Who?
Most people on the street that vote really believe that. That's why people vote for these measures.
What measures?
The hard part is to say that it's going to get ugly for a little bit before it gets better, because this is generational trauma people are dealing with. And how many people do you have working in these environments that can help people adequately?
Well, isn't that that's I thought what the point is. You cut the police budget, and so instead of there being 6 people working in that facility, there's 12 or there's 18. Or
these facilities aren't run by the state, Sam. These are nonprofits.
Well, but these nonprofits are all getting, I mean, it's more often than not, nonprofits get, NGOs will get their funding from municipalities a lot of times to provide these services, and these are the grants. And this is where, I mean, that's where theoretically some of that funding will go. I mean, we have the budget of the police department in this city is massive. It's really, I mean, that's basically what the city does. It runs a police department, on a dollar basis. And the question is, are there areas where you can begin to address some of these problems? And there's no panacea, right? I mean, like people have problems but can you both sort of like intervene before these problems get exacerbated, and also deal with those people once they have dealt with these traumas and are trying to sort of get past or moving past. I mean, the idea is to intervene in a way that is more targeted to the problems that exist in these communities of people.
And you have to have people that,
as opposed to the police department, which is we're a hammer, everything's a nail.
Yeah.
Some instances it's a screw. In some instances it's a whatever. I mean, isn't that the idea?
Again, I guess the question is, like, we're talking about facilities and building these facilities. And are you going to take police budgets and then build facilities? Are you talking about you're taking police budgets and we're going to have less mobile tanks, right? And less Kevlar vests, and we're going to hire more mental health professionals, quote unquote. But what are those mental health professionals responding to, right? We're not talking about people that are, I am your counselor, I'm this person that you're going to talk to for the next 5 years. We're talking about, I'm the guy that's going to come here to tell you to move along in a nice way. I'm going to respond to the subway. We had it with our subway system here in the Bay Area. We're going to have mental health professionals instead of law enforcement. But it's like, well, they're doing the same thing in a nicer way. Connecting me with services is handing me a card. You know what I mean?
I mean, I think there are processes that work better than others, and I think that but I think that I think that it doesn't necessarily in any way mean that this is going to solve the problem without we need to build more housing, we need to build more facilities, or what. I mean,
you need to have caps on rent first and foremost.
Sure,
we both live in
sure.
ridiculously expensive cities, and when I said that, everybody's head nodded. That changes the whole conversation about housing when you say something like that.
Of course,
first and foremost, right? And when you work in these facilities every day, I loved the people. I love the present tense, the people that not only that I work with, my coworkers, but the people that I helped on a daily basis. And, part of me feels like bad sometimes because I did leave it to do this. Sorry, I'm going to get a little emotional. But, you're up against a lot of walls.
a lot of burnout in there.
I wasn't burnout. I can deal with that. I'd much rather, this is going to sound stupid, I'd much rather deal with the chaos of the shelter than the internet. I'd much rather deal with those people telling me to F off all day than, ass maggot 45 telling me that I'm a stupid lib that doesn't know anything, right? But what we were able to accomplish in a short time in that facility, which is no longer, we had education facilities for the kids that were there. There was only a handful of kids, but we used people that used to teach that were in the facility as well instead of bringing in outside people. We're able to do physical therapy for them. We're having counseling sessions for women dealing with violence, counseling sessions for men dealing with violence. It's a long-term process.
Right.
And not everybody's on board because every 4 years you get turnover. And that's kind of my big point is when I say this, it wasn't like 400 people showed up to these sessions, it's 5. And it might not even be the 5 that you really want that are the most violent. But you start with that and you keep going. And you keep going and you keep going. And then the 4th year happens. Well, we got to kill funding for this because this many rapes happened on site. This many assaults happened on site. Yada, 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 yada happened. This isn't working. We're just move on to the next thing. And it's like, well, we learned from that thing that happened that caused those accidents. We're trying to change some security features here and there. Let's try. Let's not throw this away yet. And that's also hard to get across in messaging.
I mean, this is the problem that you're discussing, I think, is also sort of a problem that we have with education. It's a problem we have with healthcare in many respects, because any type of social service that is the actions require an adjustment to who it is that they're serving is an extremely different thing a difficult thing to message. That's why it's why cops are such an easy answer for people, because they do the same thing every time. They use force and they deal with the problem. That is like and it is a much harder thing to have these different services that see the client, if you will, where they are, react to that. It's going to be, it's more difficult. It's the way that the dynamic with education. It's also why, the educational reform movement was so effective, because it just said like, oh, we have a number that tells us how successful this teacher is. We don't have to get into like the nuance of teaching, which is exactly what teaching is. Teaching is figuring out who the student is and what they need, as opposed to being able to put in a, sort of like a predetermined formula and have some type of output and measure it there. But I think at the end of the day, you're only going to be able to do that by providing funding. And, on a municipal and state level, they don't have the ability to print money. So it's really just you got to take funding from this column and put it into that column, and then hope that column, is effective, and you have good personnel who are going to deploy that stuff in a way that's going to make sense.
I mean, look, I'm not going to say the hashtag movements. Sometimes I think the problem with hashtag movements is everything is all encompassing, and the good and the bad. So it's easy to feel like we can throw the baby away with the bathwater. And I think the everything about hashtags is annoying as shit to me, because it doesn't really get into the nuance of some of the good things that those things do, right? So there was a moment as well before 2020 that the way we view law enforcement overreach starts to get viewed on the news a lot. I mean, this country exploded with George Floyd, right? And only 4 years later, the same people that have BLM signs and I stand with George Floyd signs were like, well, we need more cops because there's a RV parked across the street from my house. And I don't like it. And the cops aren't coming. And I don't say this as conjecture or something I just heard in passing. I say this from interviewing city council representatives from Los Angeles County that were saying this to me, in our conversations. So it did some things, right? Like, look, I'm a huge proponent of not having cops in schools. I went to 2 different schools. I went to school in Richmond, California, where I'm from, and I got to go to school in Albany, California, where my dad worked. Very different environments. Kids did drugs in both of them. Kids fought in both of them. Kids cut class in both of them. But in one of them, there was a cop outside waiting for you if you effed up. In the other one, there was not. Those are life-changing situations. I got in a fight in high school. The vice principal called my father, who worked there, and the kid that I was in a fight with, dad, who coincidentally worked for Oakland PD. And our fathers met in the principal office.
Fought it out.
They told us to fight it out. Our father said, the principal's given us permission to take you to the boys club.
Oh, really?
Yeah. If you guys want to fight, we have permission to leave campus and fight. If not, I think one of our dads said, stop being punks and shake hands like men. And we did. And we've been friends ever since. But the high school in the city I'm from, you don't get that option.
Right.
Right. That's massive. I can have a felony. I can have a strike. Changes my life.
100%. 100%.
Getting cops out of schools, huge.
Yeah.
Huge. Right. That's part of that movement, right? We all are now aware, even though people were fighting for years before that to do that, it elevated that to a certain point. It gets those people out of there.
Yep.
I think we can all be on board for something like that. So there is good things that do happen from it, but also in the city that I was born in, Oakland, California, when they did get the police to like reallocate some funds, part of the group that did it, like half of them wrote a letter saying, please don't fire any cops. Because we live in the hood and we're scared for our children as they go to school because these cats are out here shooting like crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think the point is ultimately is that, one thing is not going to be sufficient. And that there's, I mean, again, this is something I think we've said many times, is that we need a wide range of changes to society to address these problems. But
it's not just clean needles, for instance.
But
no, it's not.
We've got to.
But I do have to say, like, there's one thing, Jason. Though, like, I have to say, like, I am a bit on guard against a too overcorrection on this, because I see people talking about, say, retail theft and talk about that's not a resources problem. And I got to say, like, from what I've heard even on New Republic stuff, like, actually that does seem like it is people who are driven through a type of desperation and are being exploited as such. And actually, like, if we actually dealt with not breaking people on things like addiction or housing, actually these sorts of crimes would be addressed in a pretty significant way. So, like, I agree with the general take about crime, or like these sorts of, we can't treat poverty and hope to get rid of all crime, but I do frankly worry about an overcorrection on this.
You mean like too much police force?
Like somebody saying the people that are boosting stuff from retail places, that has nothing to do with underinvestment in them or as like any sort of thing other than needing force. And like, I think that is an over application of what you're saying. Because I fully agree that there is a type of liberal who looks at like safe injection sites and like, okay, we're done with that problem. And I think that is a real risk in our current political constellation. But I also see a big problem where people say like, well, like they attack the left saying you're naive, not actually by explaining away, say, these retail boosters by saying it's something to do with poverty. And you actually look at them and they're all supporting habits. So, like, I mean, that's just what I'm concerned. That's a concern.
I mean, some people just steal because they want to steal. Like, it can't be a reality. I mean, think everybody that's a booster is doing it to fucking fund a habit. I think some people just want fucking.
I mean,
bullshit.
I cited a New Republic guy who talked to a bunch of people arrested in Brooklyn boosting, and they said they don't know anybody who was doing it for that reason. And then the actual like Brooklyn DA's office said 80-90% of these people. And to me, it's like even if it was 1/3, I would think that actually addiction is probably a better thing to address than cops. But it's over 50% by Brooklyn numbers, and that's where I'm at.
Well, they overcorrected, to your point, in San Francisco, and they changed what is going to be grand theft because it was higher because of the conditions in the prisons. The conditions in prisons were so bad in the 2000s that people were dying in holding cells people were dying waiting to get healthcare. So it was so bad. So they started letting people out. So that happens in like 2010. And for a long time, that's the way it's been. Again, it goes back to the way we see this stuff. It's not like I've never seen people rob stuff or boost stuff from the store. Look, I feel comfortable saying this now. You know, I owned a lot of stolen stuff. I had a friend that worked at Macy's in San Jose, California. And I was like, dude, how do you have so many polo shirts? This is like 1998. He's like, oh, we just steal them. Like, come down to the job. We'll steal a bunch with you too. So I was part of a culture of that at one point in my life. I guess we never did the whole run in and rob it. I think it just maybe plays well for the cameras. But listen, go ahead.
I mean, and we got to wrap this up in a second, but I think that like I don't think there is a society where there isn't some of that. And in particularly a society that, is so built around the status associated with those polo shirts back in those days. I mean, that was it. Like, I remember that. It was like, if you have a Ralph Lauren shirt, like that was, whoa, who's this guy? And
Sam, every color, Sam.
No, yeah, no. I mean, like I lived through that era. Like, oh wow, that guy's got that Ralph Lauren cologne in the green bottle or whatever it was.
Broke his hell.
I don't think, but I think like there's no society that exists without that on some level. And I guess, and certainly no society that is values money and material goods in the way that our society does, that you're not going to get some of that. But again, it's like, we're talking about how do you deal with 30% of it or 50% of it or 60% of it that also is a function of human suffering in some fashion or another, because society's not providing the basic elements that one would think we have progressed to in the evolution of society, right? Like, we should now be able to have developed those things. And so I don't know if it's...
But Capital overcorrects by saying we're going to give more power to bodyguards, to these guards that guard this stuff. That happened in San Francisco where a young trans man was shot by a bodyguard. They got into a scuffle or what do you call them? Mall cop, whatever you call them. They have guns in San Francisco. But shot him, killed him. They got into a little scuffle. The person didn't have a weapon. They threatened him or whatever. And the guy didn't serve any time. It's a more complicated story than just, that. But still, you start to give more autonomy to non-law enforcement even to have these extrajudicial powers to put people down for stealing. And to Matt's point, then it becomes a mix of the people that are just robbing to rob or whatever. And people actually, the trans person that was stealing was actually stealing food because they were battling with being unhoused.
Right.
And they were trying to steal food. And this person decided that this was the fight that we're going to get into over somebody stealing food at a Walmart or a CVS in downtown San Francisco. And a life got lost over, some candy bars.
Well, fascinating piece. Fascinating piece, Jason. We're going to put a link to Same as It Ever Was in Sublation magazine, The Illusion of American Political Discourse in the Media. Thanks so much for your time today, man. Great to see you.
Hey, Sam, Emma, Matt, Bradley, thank you guys for having me. Thank you for having an uncomfortable conversation with me. It was a good time.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Jason. All right, folks. I guess we'll do a freebie Friday.
I guess we will.
We will.
It's already 2.
St. Jimothy, breaking. Republican Mike Gallagher will resign early.
Oh my gosh, yet another one? Wait, is Gallagher the one that was on the TikTok committee? Ha ha! That's hilarious. That's
He'll resign April 19th.
Yes.
He'll resign effective April 19th.
Good. That's everybody who supported
now. Who's
that,
coming in
band
before
should be
then? McCarthy's seat's not going to be filled for another 2 months because there's a runoff. People are giving me grief about that polo cologne. You have no idea what it was like.
Oh,
back in the 80s.
I remember, but I mean, I thought that was just like my perception of what was cool when I was
You see the inflation because you guys
young.
had one polo or whatever. For my grade, it was you wear 2 polos at the
Yes,
exact same
yes,
time.
you wear 2 polos, and then you sometimes pop
collar
the
popped on
collar.
both of them sometimes,
Yeah,
yeah.
so like
Oh,
you
no,
get
that didn't
one
happen.
different color underneath.
Now I think they probably like look at Steve Bannon. He's wearing like 8 polos.
Yep,
That's true. And an
Takes that many.
ascot. Gotta protect that flabby ass neck.
let's save the Social Security stuff for Tuesday
Okay.
next week because that's not going away. But we got a
should,
lot of
Candace. We got to get to this.
I guess we should
thing.
do the Candace thing because
Yes.
Candace Owens seems to have left the building, as it were, in terms of the Daily Wire. I mean, look, we've been watching this for a while.
Yeah.
And, there's some friction. There was friction at the Daily Wire because Ben Shapiro, as you know, is the Pope of the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
He gets to determine who's a good Jew and a bad Jew.
Yeah.
And he also was one of the biggest cheerleaders for the idea that Palestinians are not human beings. And to be fair, he's not a Johnny-come-lately in this. It's not just October 7th. I mean, he's been saying this for over a decade.
Yeah.
I think in Ben's entire sort of like public life, one constant has been, aside from the fact that he really presents things that haven't been very well thought out as if they are intellectual treaties, he has also had an incredible enthusiasm around the idea that Palestinians are like animals, maybe even less than animals.
And
And should be treated as such.
Yeah, and right. So he's a committed Zionist, but it's interesting to me, and I think instructive to people, that this ouster happens not after Candace Owens has Kanye West and Nick Fuentes on, where Kanye, was it on his show or the day before, where he praised Hitler over and over and over again, and
Where Alex Jones is like, I'm going to have to disagree with you on that.
yeah, and spoke about Jewish people in the most anti-Semitic terms imaginable.
The textbook modern protocols of Elders of Zion.
And that did not prompt her ouster. No, criticizing Israel's genocide did.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think the dynamic is that she was fired. I think the dynamic was that they came to a mutually agreed upon. She had a contract. I happened to watch Dave Rubin on PDB the other day, and it really did occur to me, the Patrick Bet-David show, how much these people perceive all of this as an industry. Like, they talked about Candace and Tucker and Ben and, all the different fights they've had and this and that, but none of it was about the ideology. It was, there was some vague notion of that, in the same way that maybe like, well, Coke has a little bit more of like an acidic taste than Pepsi, and Pepsi might be sweeter. But it was really about market share. And for them, this is all business. This is really about business. And I think what happened is that Candace Owen found another potential home in the past month or so in conversations.
She's moving on up.
And she knew she could not get fired without being paid out in a contract. Their contract probably says, and I don't know when that contract was going to end, when it was re-upped. She probably doesn't have editorial control, so she can't quite scare them in the way that, let's say, maybe, on this show we could have, if we wanted to get out of a contract that we had signed that exists in the past. That doesn't matter. And I think they just came to an agreement. We're going to pay you out. And the real question is, how many months does she need to sit on the sideline? My guess is that it's a very short period of time, because they probably would have paid her out and sidelined her before.
Right.
but they have come to some agreement where she's going to take some amount of money. She knows already that she has a place to land. It could be at, with Tucker Carlson, or it could be, and I doubt it, Crowder. And that's what's happening. But here is, and Dave Rubin has announced Candace will be moving to his locals platform, according to Bingo Dango. So there it is.
How much would the bank value that at?
Oh my God, Dave's so desperate that even though he might be the other Daily Wire host, that's the most Zionist,
She could
he'll
be
accept
starting her own thing, and here she is
with Charlemagne. Why are they having her on?
So this was yesterday before the announcements, which is interesting to hear how she was talking about it.
I mean, pretty rough few months for the Breakfast Club's credibility too. Also having
Nikki Haley on?
Nikki Haley on.
They're getting serious now, talking to fascists.
Come on, Charlemagne.
Like, oh, look, fame and men wear dresses. What is that? Stop selling that to the black community. I don't like that at all.
I love the way that you and Ben Shapiro are able to disagree, but then I guess still have a business relationship. Because I saw him recently tell you, I think it was maybe a few months ago, he told you to quit over your Israel coverage, your Palestine Israel coverage.
Yeah.
What was that about?
Well, he told me, the tweet that he responded to was actually just some biblical passages. And he thought that it was me saying that I had to choose money over I don't know how we interpret it, but it was definitely not. I just meant it as like, peace, calling for peace, because, there was a video circulating of him calling me a disgrace and a faux professional or whatever it was. And I decided to choose peace. And then when I chose peace, he responded to the peace with not peace.
So why wouldn't he just fire you?
Well, as I explained on Tucker Carlson's show, like, Ben doesn't have the power to fire me. And it's not even saying that we disagree on Israel and Palestine. I just think that he's obviously, his wife is Israeli. He spends a lot of time in Israel throughout the year. I think when you have an emotional attachment to some place, that sometimes your reaction to anything is going to be.
Pause it for 1 second.
Whoa!
Is she saying that Ben Shapiro's feelings are operating over facts?
My feelings could never get in the way of facts.
What?
Okay, go ahead.
Time in Israel throughout the year. I think when you have an emotional attachment to some place, that sometimes your reaction to anything is going to be more extreme to it. I have some relatives that are from St. Thomas. If what was happening in that region was happening in St. Thomas, I would probably be the most fired up out of everybody at the Daily Wire. And yeah, he definitely went through, I think, an emotional time at the end of last year, dealing with everything. I think I was pretty even keel. I don't want to see innocent Palestinians killed. I don't want to see innocent Israelis killed. I never want to see children killed. I don't believe children should have to grow up in a war zone based on the actions of a few. And that, I guess, last year sounded crazy. It sounded crazy because always the demand in all these situations is to make people pick a side. And then if you don't pick their side, then you get smeared and you get libeled, right? So if you don't say, I want every Palestinian murdered, then suddenly you're pro-Hamas. If you don't say, like, I want every Israeli person eradicated, then suddenly
Sorry,
you're
can we just
pro-
pause and remind people what she actually said? She's right that she's been even keeled about this, and she said no one should support genocide or that sort of thing. She didn't say Israel genocide. She said the genocide would be objectionable, and Ben Shapiro did get mad about that. I just want to be explicit about what she actually did say.
So if you don't say, I want every Palestinian murdered, then suddenly you're pro-Hamas. If you don't say, like, I want every Israeli person eradicated, then suddenly you're pro-apartheid, whatever the arguments are. And I think both of that is extreme.
You said no government anywhere has a right to commit a genocide, ever. There is no justification for genocide.
Yeah. That is going to age so well.
There we go.
Genocide is always wrong. It is, guys. It is always wrong. And doesn't matter at any point in human history, any person that is advocating for genocide is always in the wrong. And when I wrote that tweet, I was referring to Brian Mast, who was a congressman. He got up and he literally said in Congress that there's no such thing as an innocent Palestinian. And I was like, that is genocidal, right? As soon as you say an entire group of people are all evil, you are now laying the groundwork to justify a genocide. And that to me was wild. So I spoke up against it.
Interesting.
She comes off as a rational human being there. I hope that Charlemagne brought up the stuff. Tell us about the part where you thought not Hitler was good.
Yeah.
But
Right. It was not. It was the fact that he was expansionist. That was what her commentary was. That he was didn't confine his policies to just Germany. That he decided to be an imperialist. So,
I mean, a more direct follow up movement is Israel committing a genocide
Yes.
right now. Do you want to actually go on the record and say that? I
got
don't know.
closer than
Candace wouldn't. Yeah, exactly.
She got closer than I thought she would.
Yeah, but I mean, because why I'm cynical is that she had Norm Finkelstein on and made some noise and then went on maternity leave and then came back and instead she started talking about Jewish Marxists and she meant Rabbi Shmuley. They started going to war with Rabbi Shmuley and not like actually the genocide that's happening now. So I was a little bit cynical about the move that she's made. But look, call out Brian Mast for that genocidal statement. That's a good thing to do.
But let me say, just give a prediction here. I think she'll go to another network, probably best
Or start
odds,
her own,
or
maybe.
start her own. But I would put the best odds right now at like the Tucker Carlson network. Put that at minus
PBD.
200 or something like
I
that.
want my money on PBD.
That's good odds for that. And she's going to be an anti-imperialist, anti-war, anti-Ukraine funding, but also anti-Israel funding, kind of paleo-conservative as her new rebrand. That will be my guess because, I think that she will probably frame her departure from the Daily Wire as they're neocons, they're kind of Nikki Haley-esque, we're the more isolationist, we want to focus on the border. Right. So, she actually for the first time made like a reasonable, decent point. I mean, she's fence-sitting there and sounded somewhat rational. I think, as you were saying at the beginning, we underestimate how much they view it as a business. Like, why is Ben Shapiro moving away from his, I'm a wonky policy guy thing and talking about Barbie and whatever the box office is every week? It's because it's that cynical for them. So if now she can kind of be a little bit more forthright as an avenue to rebranding herself, that's what that will be. It's all about the money for these guys.
Put up the tweet from Jeremy Boring today. That was yesterday, and here's today. Daily Wire and Candace Owens from Jeremy Boring have ended their relationship.
And it is fun to look at the replies to all this because it's all these right-wing, but probably anti-Semites, saying, you're regulating and suppressing her speech. But I am all for letting them fight.
Absolutely.
But to your point, guys, too, about the business side of it. I mean, these guys are also all in some way or another prominent. The people who are prominently featured on the Daily Wire: Ben Shapiro, former screenwriter; Jeremy Boring, former Hollywood, prospective aspiring Hollywood executive; Michael Knowles, former actor. Like, these people are playing parts in a way, not of course in their presentation, but they're also like. We have roles to fill in. The new season for us is now the Barbie shit because that's what people want to hear.
I don't know. I'm a former actor.
Yeah, but you have more scruples than Michael Knowles does.
That may be the case.
Jury's out on that.
Let's see if I understand that there is an opening at the Daily Wire.
Although I will say Sam's reel is better.
You're pivotal.
That's true.
You got way more gigs than all three of those guys combined.
Oh,
so.
100%. I mean, I sold.
You are the steak-spitting Knicks fan
That's right.
in the LA episode. There we go.
This is all I wanted. It was just the thirst trap. That was all I was involved in.
This is actually probably an understated reason of why they might hate
And other
you,
things.
is that actually you've actualized something another.
Oh,
one
I
of your
lived
dreams.
their dreams, without a doubt.
Sam's
I
pivot to the
lived their
culture
dreams.
war wasn't as hard as
I lived their
Ben's
dreams.
Ben Shapiro wishes he were directing Gary Busey.
I would have
in
taken that. Put me in a scene with Cynthia Nixon. I'll choke up on that steak better than anybody. Oh, I'm bulimic.
The hardest thing for me would have been pretending to be a Knicks fan.
A square. Sam, agree 100%. Owens wanted her money to get out. Don't forget her husband runs Turning Point, so she'll be somewhere in the crazy right media stratosphere.
The Turning Point UK, the monarchist Turning Point.
By the way, I have some 2006, 2007 MR downloads. Let me know how to get them to the MR team. Wow, that would be helpful. I can also can majority reporters 20-year members get first access to those commemorative mugs? We will definitely put one aside for you. Send us an email, A Square, and we can figure it out. Maybe you can just upload it to a Google Drive, and we can download it from there. That would be really helpful. Should we?
Oh, the disgraced former psychologist Jordan Peterson.
Yes. Or, yeah. Let's. What do you think, Sam?
Well, I don't know. Maybe we could do that one next week and do these Lev Parnas things.
Okay.
Okay.
We didn't cover it yesterday.
The Lev Parnas.
Former Sam Halloween costume.
That's right. I went as Lev Parnas one year, just because I had like the medallion.
How many people got that?
That's the final level of trivia. If we ever do a Sam Seder trivia, that's going to be the question for like all the marbles at the end.
Wait, what medallion? I don't know what you're talking about.
There was a picture of him hanging out and wearing sweatsuit with Rudy Giuliani, where he had a medallion on. And it was like Halloween day, and I'm looking around my house, and like there was, there was a medallion around that, and I just put that on. That was my costume.
Okay.
Everybody knew what it.
Everybody knew that one picture of Lev Parnas.
My whole theory about Halloween is, you want something that's not going to be so obvious that people don't need to ask you.
I'm trying to find this picture.
It's a way of meeting people and conversing.
Yeah, no, I think it's good to have a costume that's so obscure that even an issue expert like Emma would be still confused after you explain it.
I used to back in my comedy days, in a sort of homage to a friend of mine, I would, for Halloween, I would wear an ostomy bag.
Mm-hmm.
And people would say, "Where?"
There we go.
There it is. And where? How come you didn't wear a costume? And I said, "I did. I have it. I've got an ostomy bag."
So, you wore a red T-shirt and
the iconic photo of Lev Parnas in a drunken Rudy Giuliani.
a necklace.
I don't even think I wore a red T-shirt. I just had a medallion, and people would be like, What do you do? Who are you? And I'm like, Lev Parnas. And they go, who's Lev Parnas? And it was my way of being able to talk about Lev Parnas.
Okay. So let's talk about Lev Parnas.
Who is Lev Parnas? Lev Parnas was an associate of Rudy Giuliani's, and he is he Ukrainian or Russian? He's Ukrainian, of Ukrainian descent. Well, I mean, I think he's first generation Ukrainian immigrant. And he was basically tasked to find dirt on Joe Biden. And he had trouble doing it. He couldn't find actual dirt. So they kept looking for innuendo that essentially Giuliani and, as he's going to outline, members of Congress would begin to massage a little bit. Here is Parnas talking about how this system worked. This is, which one is this, 11?
Do you want to do the second one or the first one?
Which one should go first?
The first one. Let's do the first one, then we'll do the second.
Okay.
From shortly after my arrest on October 9, 2019 to now, I have been trying to share the irrefutable truth with you. The American people have been lied to by Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, and various cohorts of individuals in government and media positions. They created falsehoods to serve their own interests, knowing it would undermine the strength of our nation. From November 2018 to October 2019, I was a key participant and a witness to numerous efforts to prove that Joe and Hunter Biden were linked to corruption in Ukraine. Rudy Giuliani, on behalf of then President Donald Trump, tasked me with a mission to travel the globe, finding dirt on the Bidens so that an array of networks could spread misinformation about them, thus securing the 2020 election for Donald J. Trump. Ironically, when I was arrested, my original indictment linked me to an individual referred to as unindicted co-conspirator 1. We now know this individual to be Congressman Pete Sessions, who sits on this very committee today. Today, I ask you to consider the following. In nearly a year traveling the world and interviewing officials in different countries, I found precisely zero evidence of the Biden's corruption in Ukraine. No credible source has ever provided proof of criminal activity, not the FBI, CIA, nor the NSA. No respectable Ukrainian official has ever said that the Bidens did anything illegal, including former President Poroshenko and former Prosecutor General Yuri Lutsenko. Even when CEO of Burisma, Mykola Zlochevsky, was offered a deal by Rudy Giuliani in exchange for information on the Bidens, he provided none, because there is none. The only information ever pushed on the Bidens in Ukraine has come from one source, and one source only: Russia and Russian agents. The impeachment proceedings that bring us here now are predicated on false information spread by the Kremlin. Everyone involved knew they were sharing lies. From Trump and Giuliani's shadow diplomacy, through my missions to Ukraine and elsewhere, to members of a BLT team, a group convened for the sole purpose of investigating and damaging the Bidens.
There you go. Parnas, someone reminds me that his company's name, and I don't know if it was with Fruman rather, was literally called Fraud Inc.
Cheeky.
This is a little cheeky. This is, incidentally, we should say, the main committee trying to come up with impeachment terms for the Biden administration, chaired by James Comer. Parnas is obviously a Democratic called witness, but probably room for him to get on the schedule because the chief Republican witness is in jail right now for lying. Here's Parnas.
To start trying to push narratives that were that were not validated. We had no way to validate them. Basically, a letter would come over from somebody in Ukraine. I'd hand it over to John Solomon. Next thing you knew, he was on Fox TV 2 hours later with Sean Hannity.
At what point did Mr. Giuliani begin working directly with Russian agents and Russian assets, individuals who would later become sanctioned by Donald Trump's own Treasury Department for spreading propaganda and disinformation against Joe Biden?
It was sometime in probably around May, June of 2019.
Were you aware, was Mr. Giuliani aware that these people were basically just doing the bidding of Vladimir Putin?
Absolutely.
So he had no hesitation about spreading lies that were concocted by Russian agents?
As long as it fit the narrative, absolutely not.
How were you and Giuliani able to take these false allegations peddled by corrupt officials and Russian agents and promote and amplify them here in the United States, in our political system? Weren't media groups skeptical of your claims?
Most media groups, I'd probably say all except for Fox and a few other right-wing media groups, didn't want to take any of the information, and that aggravated Rudy Giuliani and John Solomon and other players. And the main group that was being pushed through was Fox, Sean Hannity, and some other media personnel over there. But then there was also other people that were doing the bidding for the Russian people in Congress, like Senator Ron Johnson, like Congressman Pete Sessions that sits here right now, that was with me from the very beginning of this journey into finding up digging dirt on Joe Biden.
Can we not have a cutaway to Pete Sessions when he says that?
I'm desperately looking to see if anybody had a cell phone camera in there or something.
I mean, it's sort of amazing based upon the amount of coverage of the absolute BS. And look, I got problems with Joe Biden, and I think Hunter Biden is a ne'er-do-well in every respect. But the amount of coverage that we have gotten about Joe Biden's non-scandals. Like the idea that this isn't wall to wall, that I don't like, that I should be able to wear my Lev Parnas chain and medallion and have everybody go like, "Oh wow, did you see that testimony?"
Yeah.
Never mind on Halloween. Just be like, "Oh, is that a Lev Parnas medallion?" Like the media has gone back into the same mode that it existed back in 2016, which is really, in many respects, sort of like because it is a sort of a to the extent that we still have any media, and a lot of it is New York Times. There is a liberal sociopathy that makes them feel they need to overrepresent lies and bullshit as a way of doing their job, as opposed to, it is not as opposed without sort of like to compensate from what they think is their biases.
Or what they're told is their biases over and over and over.
For whatever
again.
mechanism it is that they feel like that they're going to reveal their biases in some way, they overcompensate. And I think some of these decisions are made at the, on the publisher level at the New York Times.
Was it the Clinton cash? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
People forget this, that the New York Times partnered with Steve Bannon. Before anybody knew who Steve Bannon was. And by anybody, I mean the Times had a vague notion of who he was. They partnered with him to run excerpts of a book that he basically produced, that was all about Clinton's emails. The New York Times did. I don't know, we don't have a mechanism to remind people enough about that. Because everybody who reads the New York Times, not everybody, but 98% would be like, wait, what? The New York Times partnered with Steve Bannon?
Peter Schweitzer. We heard more about people being upset that the New York Times published Tom Cotton talking about military rule and how censorious we were being by criticizing that we'd heard about Peter Schweitzer.
Because it happened far enough out in the run up to the election that people were not aware of what was going on. They weren't paying attention. And it was also in an era where we were in between blogs and social media really rising to the level of where it was, in the late teens in this country. And
it's just amazing. We'll, I'm sure, get even more subsequent reporting about the origin of the laptop. You're hearing what Parnas is saying about Giuliani and their tactics.
Without a doubt.
I mean, what is the origin of the laptop? Oh, it was Hunter Biden's laptop was found at a repair shop, and
Delaware.
they also we accessed all of its most salacious contents.
You're a
and
lib if you
published
care
them.
about the chain of custody on these
Yeah,
sorts of things.
apparently. And I mean, never mind people knowing Lev Parnas. What about Alexander Smirnov, the lead witness in this?
Gal
who
Luft,
is
the Chinese asset as well.
a admitted Russian asset, basically.
Smirnov is admitted Russian asset, yeah. And also,
Yeah.
And it is interesting, though, too, that I feel like the taxonomy of this stuff for Republicans has gotten so shorthand that, Jim Jordan can kind of just go on Fox and rifle off, 7 different Ukrainian names to the point where it's, hard to actually contextualize all of it. But when you listen to Parnas, he basically line by line deconstructs all of their points about what was occurring specifically in regards to Ukrainian oversight over Burisma. And because people are not that interested in actually kind of zeroing in on that beyond Republicans are looking to impeach Biden over concerns about influence peddling. There's nothing results from it. Nothing actually comes from it.
No one knows what the influence peddling is. And then meanwhile, Jared Kushner's been in the news this week. He got $2 billion in Saudi investment after the...
and is now going into new projects in Serbia and Albania afterwards.
And potentially a new waterfront property in Gaza.
And I was saying this to Sam, too, that where while this is all going on and Lev Parnas is trying to swim upstream to like sort of have any sort of counter to this, Senate Democrats are nowhere to be found with their investigatory authority
Well, that's
to
the
investigate
thing.
Kushner.
There could have been. This could have been going on in the Senate, and I get the argument. Maybe we need to pass judges, but you don't need to do it in the judiciary. You could have done it somewhere else. I mean, it's such a failure. It's that temerity. It's the same temerity that you see within the press, the Democrats have. Well, if we press too hard on this.
Partisan.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple IMs, then we'll get out of here. I just saw one. Old Chomsky, you should have seen Sam's Boogie Nights costume in '97. As the director of Who's the Caboose, he was able to procure another type of medallion from Andy Dick. Well, I don't know. What? I'm not sure what that was.
I don't know what. I don't like how it
My
sounded.
brain hurts. How do I prove Majority Report, our Majority Report devotion since 2004 when my iPod and iPod Mini are long broken and all the downloaded episodes are gone? Find them. Find them.
Anyone can dust off an old hard drive.
Mail us the iPod, and we will go and get some like data recovery.
And we will not publish all of its contents in the New York Post under dubious circumstances.
That's correct.
Hunter Biden reference for you.
Iowa Ryan. Well, I can't click on that link. Sorry. Fetterman's lonely sweatshirt. I heard Judy Gold is going to be taking the place of Candace Owens on Daily Wire. No, I don't think that's the case. Disco Asylum. There's nothing I want more than Sam to take a hearty bite of an apple right in front of the mic. While we're on the Daily Wire, the channel Some More News on YouTube the other day released an objective review of Lady Ballers, and it ended up completely eviscerating their entire ideology. Highly recommended.
Yeah, I watched the first.
Oh,
half of
yeah.
it.
Oh, folks, this happened too. Look at this. We should mention this on Monday as well. Oh, but
Don't play the song.
Oh yeah, no sound.
Yeah.
But I guess she posted this like 3 or 4 days ago. I am not on Instagram that much at all, to be honest with you. But somebody sent me a link, and it's very difficult to link into the. If someone sends you a link and you're not like you're using Instagram, it's hard to find. But
yeah, that's because they want you to create an account.
Yep. Laverne Cox apparently is a fan of the program or the our merchandise. This is very nice of her to do.
I mean, look at
It's
that.
amazing. It's the Majority Report hat, the whoopsie shirt. And you look over in the corner there, because the song we can't play is a Cardi B song. Cardi B
Commented.
commenting yes. So, I mean, I'd like Cardi B, if you want to wear some Majority Report merch, just get in touch and we can make that happen for you.
It's the chances of me knowing a celebrity are very, very slim. But I was a fan of her work in Orange is the New Black, or at least in the first couple of years. I don't know if I followed it to the end, because it's so difficult when they cancel those shows and they restart them.
That was back.
But I actually knew who she was.
Yeah, Netflix originals were like impactful.
Yes. So this was exciting.
Yeah, really, really exciting. I mean, good job. Well, not good job, but I mean, I gotta praise her for the shirt selection that she picked. It's the whoopsie shirt.
Yeah, it's looks good on her.
I mean,
I didn't realize how stylish this stuff was.
It's really great. Yeah, no, yeah.
She's awesome. So I really was in awe to see that she posted that, and like is such a fan that she put it on her profile, right?
Yep.
And linked to our merch. So
Oh, she did?
yeah.
No,
wow.
well, so I think maybe Dorsey reposted it, and then she reposted the link to our merch.
Okay,
So,
there we
yeah,
go.
Oh,
That's
wow.
what it was.
That's awesome.
I'm very happy about that.
Yep, that was exciting. Well, everybody was very excited about that, actually. Okay, Golden Oyster Cult. Candace Owens just got poop canned. Everybody understands the FBI agents in Die Hard endangering the lives of the hostages to kill the terrorists or the bad guys. Why will the media not condemn Israel endangering the hostages by bombing and starving them?
Yeah.
I think the Die Hard thing, I'm not sure that...
Sometimes people will defend
that movie
cops.
was like 20 years ago. My Caitlin bio, more than that, 40 years ago. Jeez. One of the richest and most military powerful country in the world, we think a ceasefire could be a good option. Not sure I follow that. Brooklyn Sue. Speaking of stress, have you looked at Judy Gold's Instagram lately? I am not on Instagram. Cherry Ghost. Hey, crew, lots of new strike funds are up at strikeaid.com, including grad workers at Boston University. Strike starts Monday. Good to know.
It's in the show notes if you guys want to check it out. Strike Aid.
Okay. And the UAW local at Mass MoCA and nurses in Oregon. Check out the site for more info and chip in a few bucks. Potential guests for the program. These people. Bradley. Okay.
What?
Great. I'm talking about the strikes that are happening there. Steve CJ, if U.S. pressure has no chance of influencing other states' behavior, then what is foreign policy? If Islam had some prophecy where the death of millions of Christians would bring about the Messiah, the right would be losing their effing minds. Yes, that's true. The point being that Israel is very important to Christian Zionists because that's how we bring about the Messiah.
The Messiah, yep.
And
My name is Charlie Kirk.
I am contractually obligated to remind people that 2/3 go to hellfire, 1/3 sit on the right-hand side of God, and I've got to be in that 1/3 because of my eczema.
Yeah.
And hellfire is one of the worst things.
For
Because
eczema.
my eczema gets brought out in heat.
Yeah. That would
So-
be tough.
I'm a winter guy, so I'd be okay.
I just feel like God would not, hellfire is one thing, but hellfire with eczema,
No.
too much.
Can't happen.
Too much. Ostentatious. Inviting Netanyahu to address a joint session of Congress is giving a lollipop to the toddler who just burned down the neighborhood. Sleepy Joe Rogan. They'll be held to pay. They'll be held to pay. You're splitting hairs now. Okay. That is a Frank Luntz. All right, 5 more. Breaking news. Same person writing the same thing over again. Cosmer piece came in late, but have you guys covered Candy getting fired from the Daily Wire? Another person. Yes, we did. Oy, oy, oy. German leftists. Ben talks about Barbie because in entertainment media was all he ever. Being in entertainment media was all he ever wanted. Breaking news: a big terrorist attack in Moscow. Several people are reported dead following explosions and shot fired at a concert hall.
Wow.
Oh, jeez. Dylan M. I've been trying to remove the Daily Wire app from the Google store by flagging it for hate speech and misinformation. It's constantly in violation of the content policies. More people need to flag and report these apps, content to these platforms that are just dragging their feet on enforcing their policies because of profit. All right, 2 more. Tater Tot. Have you heard of the streaming platform Dropout? It's a rebranding of College Humor and run by Robert Reich's son. It has a variety of scripted improv shows and recently had an auction fund to support the Palestinian Children Relief. No, I have never heard of that.
I remember College Humor.
Do you remember Burly Bear?
No.
Oh, all right.
That was, what was the most famous sketch on that? The Landlord with Will Ferrell. There were a few of them.
I barely remember any.
Oh, that was Funny or Die.
Oh, that was Funny or Die. Never mind. Sorry. I do remember College Humor, though, but I don't remember
I
what
can't
was
remember
on
any
it
of the
now.
output.
Yeah. The birthday. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right.
You guys remember Salad Fingers?
2 more.
I'm not sick, but I'm not well.
Johnny Walker Red Label. The name is Walker. Johnny Walker. Not with M-I. Okay.
Don't drink Red Label.
2 more.
Drink black.
Jonathan Armstead. Laverne Cox IM'd into the show in March of last year. Emma read it.
I know, but we thought that was someone
Just
pretending.
using her name.
Yeah.
Rob from Dedham. Sam, just a suggestion for the AM Quickie. Can we get this day in MR history and highlight some of the guests and segments you've had on over the years? Oh, we were doing that on Instagram, actually, for a while. And yeah, maybe. I'm not sure the return on investment is worth it there, but JR in Philly, I'm betting she'll wind up at NPR. We need fresh voices like hers. And the final I am of the day.
The week.
Of the week. Jay Tingle. What was the Mike Lindell thing you brought up on Wednesday?
Oh, yeah.
We're going to have to do that next week. Mike Lindell is evergreen, as we say.
It's funny JR and Philly said it about NPR because Ronna McDaniel just got hired by NBC News.
That is like, if the world is a simulation designed to drive me insane, Candace Owens will go to NPR.
Yep.
She'll be on like Morning Edition or whatever their show's called.
Bradley, Matt, Emma, great job this week. Great job, John Aarons and Dorsey Shaw, Julie Seder, Isaac, and Kelly, and Christina, and Chris, and of course, Jacob and Corey on the AM Quickie, and Maria. See you on Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light's shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the rope that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know